You've said it before, maybe quietly, maybe more often than you admit. If only I had started earlier. A different time, a different decision, a different version of you. And every time that thought appears, it carries weight, the kind that makes the present feel smaller than it really is. Because when you look back, everything seems clearer. You see the missed chances, the delays, the moments where you could have acted but didn't. And from where you stand now, it feels like those moments mattered more than anything you can do today. At first, it feels like reflection, but over time, it becomes something else, a quiet belief that the opportunity has already passed, that whatever could have been built needed to begin back then, not now. And without realizing it, you begin to hold yourself back. But here's what most people never question. You're comparing your current awareness to your past decisions. You're judging who you were with what you know now. And that comparison is never fair, because you didn't have this perspective years ago. You didn't see what you can see now. And because of that, you couldn't act the way you think you should have. But your mind ignores that. It only sees the gap. And that gap creates hesitation. It makes you question whether starting now is even worth it, whether there's enough time left to make something meaningful, whether the effort will lead anywhere at all. And this is where most people stop, not because they can't move forward, but because they've convinced themselves that the timing is wrong, that they're late, that they've missed something that cannot be recovered. So they wait, waiting for a different feeling, waiting for certainty, waiting for the right moment that never comes. But what if the idea of being too late is the very thing keeping you stuck? What if time has not been working against you, but waiting for you to see clearly enough to act with intention? Because clarity changes everything. It removes distraction. It sharpens focus. It eliminates what no longer matters. And when you have that clarity, you move differently. You stop wasting energy. You stop chasing what leads nowhere. You begin to act with purpose instead of uncertainty. And that alone changes your pace. There are people who started later than you and still built something significant, not because they had more time, but because they used their time differently. They moved with urgency, not panic, with direction, not confusion. Because once you understand what matters, you stop hesitating. You stop overthinking. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You begin to act even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels uncertain, even if it feels late. And that's where everything begins to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. Momentum begins to return. Small results begin to appear, then larger ones. And over time, what once felt impossible begins to feel within reach. But none of that happens if you stay focused on what's behind you, because the past cannot be changed. But it can control you if you keep giving it attention. It can shape your decisions, limit your actions, and convince you that your future is already decided. But it isn't. The only thing that matters now is what you choose to do next. There is a habit of the mind that, if left unexamined, quietly becomes the source of limitation. It is the tendency to look backward, not to learn, but to judge. A man reflects on his past, not to gather strength, but to measure himself against what might have been, and in doing so, he weakens his position in the present. If I were beginning again, I would not look back to condemn what has already passed. I would look back only to understand, because understanding strengthens while judgment restricts. Many men fall into this pattern without realizing it. They revisit earlier decisions with the knowledge they possess today and conclude that they should have acted differently. Yet this conclusion is built upon an unfair comparison. The knowledge they now possess did not exist for them then. The clarity they now hold was not available at that time. If I were beginning again, I would recognize this difference clearly. Because a man cannot act upon what he does not yet understand. When he judges his past without acknowledging this truth, he creates a false belief. That belief suggests that he has failed in ways that could have been avoided, when in fact he simply acted within the limits of his awareness. Over time, this belief becomes fixed. It repeats itself until it is accepted as truth. It tells him that the opportunity belonged to another time, that the correct moment has passed, and that what remains is insufficient. And without any external force, he begins to limit his own action. If I were beginning again, I would not accept this belief without examination, because it is not reality, it is interpretation. There is also the nature of time that must be understood. Time does not judge, it does not favor those who begin early, nor does it reject those who begin later. It moves forward with equal pace for all. It offers itself completely to those who act with intention and passes silently by those who hesitate. If I were beginning again, I would not treat time as an opponent. I would recognize it as a neutral force that responds only to how it is used. There are men who began early and achieved little, not because they lacked time, but because they lacked direction. Their effort was scattered, their attention divided, and their actions inconsistent. Time, though abundant, produced little because it was not directed. There are others who began later, yet advanced rapidly, not because they possessed more time, but because they used it with clarity. They understood what mattered and eliminated what did not. Their effort was focused, their direction defined, and their movement consistent. If I were beginning again, I would study this difference carefully, because it reveals a principle that is often overlooked. It is not the amount of time that determines outcome, but the precision with which it is used. There is also a point in a man's life where clarity begins to emerge. He sees, often for the first time, what truly matters. The distractions that once occupied his attention lose their influence. The pursuits that once seemed important fall away. What remains is a clear direction. If I were beginning again, I would value this clarity above all else, because it is not something that appears without cause. It is formed through experience, through years of observing, deciding, correcting, and refining. Without those years, this clarity would not exist. What appears to be delay is often preparation, and this preparation, though not visible in the moment, becomes the foundation for future action. A man who understands this no longer sees his past as wasted. He sees it as necessary. Each experience, whether it produced immediate results or not, contributed to his present understanding. If I were beginning again, I would measure my progress not by when I began, but by how clearly I now see my direction. There is also a shift that occurs when this understanding is accepted. Regret begins to lose its influence. In its place comes a different kind of urgency. Not panic, but purpose. A man realizes that while time continues to move, it may now be directed with intention. This realization changes how he acts. He no longer moves without aim. He does not divide his attention among many paths. He selects one direction and applies his effort to it consistently. If I were beginning again, I would remove unnecessary movement, because scattered effort produces scattered results. Focused effort, repeated over time, produces accumulation. Many men work hard, yet achieve little, because their effort lacks direction. They change course frequently. They pursue multiple objectives at once, and in doing so, they expend energy without building anything substantial. If I were beginning again, I would direct my effort toward a definite aim. Each action would support that aim, and each result would build upon the last. Progress, in this way, becomes visible not through sudden change, but through steady growth. To others, this may appear rapid. It may seem as though advancement has occurred in a short period, but in reality, it is the result of focused effort guided by understanding. There is also a noticeable change in the individual who acts with clarity. Where there was once hesitation, there is now decisiveness. Where there was once confusion, there is now direction. He appears more composed, more deliberate, and more certain. This is not the result of outward effort alone. It is the result of inner alignment. His thoughts, decisions, and actions are no longer in conflict. They move together toward a single objective. If I were beginning again, I would seek this alignment, because without it, effort is weakened by contradiction. Such alignment is not achieved in a single moment. It is built through repeated decisions. Each time a man chooses to act in accordance with his purpose, he strengthens that purpose. Each decision reinforces the next, and over time a new pattern is formed. If I were beginning again, I would not consult my past for permission to act. I would use my present understanding as the foundation for movement. Because action must be guided by what is known now, not by what was misunderstood before. There is also the discipline required to maintain this direction. The mind will return to familiar thoughts. It will suggest that one has begun too late. It will attempt to revive past conclusions. If I were beginning again, I would meet these thoughts with firm opposition, not through denial, but through understanding. I would remind myself that I now possess knowledge that changes my position. I would affirm with conviction, I do not measure my life by when I began, but by the power with which I now proceed. This is not empty encouragement. It is a principle that, when applied, reshapes thought. As this principle is repeated and supported by action, hesitation begins to weaken. The individual no longer waits for a different feeling to justify movement. He understands that action creates momentum. By beginning, even in a small way, he sets in motion a process that builds upon itself. Over time, what once seemed distant begins to come within reach. The gap between intention and result narrows, not because circumstances have changed, but because his approach has changed. If I were beginning again, I would focus on this process, because it is through consistent, directed action that progress becomes inevitable. There is also a realization that emerges from this practice. The opportunity that once appeared to belong to the past is revealed to exist in the present. It was not absent, it was unseen, and once it is recognized, it may be acted upon immediately. If I were beginning again, I would not concern myself with what has passed. I would act upon what is available now, because the present is the only point at which action can occur, and it is through action that time begins to work in your favor. Having understood that the past does not determine your future, the next principle becomes clear. What matters now is not when you should have begun, but how you choose to proceed from this moment forward. Because once a man accepts that he cannot return to the past, he is faced with a more important responsibility, the use of his present. And it is here that most hesitate again, not because they lack understanding, but because they underestimate what consistent action, applied from this point onward, can produce over time. If I were beginning again, I would not question whether I have enough time. I would question how I am using the time I have. There is a tendency to measure what remains by comparing it to what has passed. A man thinks of the years behind him and concludes that what is ahead must be insufficient, yet this comparison is flawed, because the years that have passed were not used with the clarity he now possesses. They were filled with learning, with adjustment, with experience that has now produced understanding. If I were beginning again, I would not measure remaining time against past time. I would measure it against present awareness, because awareness changes the value of time. A single year used with direction may produce more than 10 years used without it. There is also the principle of intensity combined with focus. When a man acts without direction, his effort is divided. His results are limited. But when he acts with clarity, each action supports the next. There is no waste. There is no contradiction. Everything contributes to a single aim. If I were beginning again, I would concentrate my effort fully, because concentrated effort produces acceleration. It creates a sense that progress is increasing, even if time itself has not changed. This is why some appear to advance rapidly later in life. It is not that they have more time, but that they use it more effectively. There is also the discipline of beginning immediately. Many understand what must be done, yet delay action. They wait for the right conditions, the right feeling, or the right moment, but these rarely appear in perfect form. If I were beginning again, I would not wait for ideal conditions. I would act with what is available, because action clarifies what thought cannot. It reveals what must be adjusted. It builds momentum. Without action, even the clearest understanding remains inactive. and inactivity produces no result. There is also the importance of continuity. A man may begin with strong intention, yet fail to continue. He acts for a short period, then pauses. He redirects, hesitates, or stops altogether. And in doing so, he interrupts the process. If I were beginning again, I would protect continuity above all, because it is not a single action that produces change, but repeated action applied over time. Each step builds upon the last, and when uninterrupted, this process creates accumulation. Accumulation, when sustained, leads to growth that becomes increasingly visible. There is also the concept of compounding. It is often misunderstood as something that applies only to money, but it applies equally to effort, to knowledge, and to skill. Each day a man acts with intention. He adds to what he has already built. Each improvement strengthens his position. Each repetition increases his effectiveness. If I were beginning again, I would rely on this principle, because it does not require sudden change. It requires consistency, and consistency, when maintained, produces results that appear to accelerate over time. There is also the challenge of perception. To others, the results of compounding often appear sudden. They see advancement and assume it happened quickly. They do not see the repetition, the persistence, the steady accumulation that led to it. If I were beginning again, I would not concern myself with how my progress appears to others. I would focus on the process itself, because the process determines the result, not perception. There is also the need to eliminate what does not contribute to your direction. A man who wishes to advance must remove distraction. He must reduce unnecessary activity. He must direct his attention toward what builds his objective. If I were beginning again, I would examine my actions carefully. I would remove what does not support my aim, because every moment spent without purpose weakens the effect of the moments that do. There is also the importance of belief. Not belief in the past, but belief in the present ability to act. A man who believes he is too late will act with hesitation. His effort will be uncertain. His results will reflect that uncertainty. But a man who believes that his present action can produce future result will act with confidence, and that confidence strengthens his movement. If I were beginning again, I would build belief through action, because belief that is supported by action becomes stable. There is also a transformation in identity that must occur. A man who once saw himself as someone who delayed must begin to see himself as someone who acts. This is not achieved through words alone. It is formed through repeated behavior. Each time he acts without delay, he reinforces a new identity, and over time, that identity becomes natural. If I were beginning again, I would build this identity deliberately, because identity shapes decision, and decision shapes result. There is also the removal of fear related to time. A man often fears that he does not have enough time to succeed, yet this fear weakens his action. It causes hesitation. It creates doubt. If I were beginning again, I would remove this fear by focusing on the present moment, because action can only occur now. Time is only useful when it is used. Concern over what remains does not increase it. It only reduces the effectiveness of what is available. There is also the strengthening of discipline. Discipline allows a man to act regardless of feeling. It ensures continuity. It maintains direction. If I were beginning again, I would rely on discipline, not motivation, because motivation changes, but discipline remains. It allows action to continue even when conditions are not ideal, and it is through continued action that results are produced. There is also a final realization that must be understood. The difference between those who regret the past and those who transform their future is not in their circumstances. It is in their response. One remains focused on what has passed. The other directs attention toward what can be done now, and over time, their results diverge completely. If I were to express this as instruction, it would be this: do not measure your opportunity by the years behind you. Measure it by the power of your present action. Fix this firmly within your mind. I begin now, I act now. I build from this moment forward, because once you live by this principle, the question of being too late disappears. And in its place comes something far more powerful: momentum. Momentum, once created, continues. It builds upon itself. It reduces hesitation. It strengthens belief, and it accelerates progress. If I were beginning again, I would create momentum immediately, because it is not the past that determines your future. It is the action you take now, repeated over time, with clarity and direction. In the end, the truth is simple. The past is gone. Not partially, not temporarily, completely. No amount of reflection, regret, or analysis can return you to it. And yet, many men continue to live as though it still holds authority over what they can do now. They measure their present by what they did not do before. They allow previous inaction to define current possibility. And in doing so, they surrender the only advantage they truly possess: the present moment. If I were beginning again, I would not allow the past to decide my future. I would acknowledge it, learn from it, and leave it where it belongs, because its only value is in the understanding it provides, not the limitation it suggests. There is a point where a man must decide, not whether he should have started earlier, not whether he could have done more, but whether he will act now, because that decision changes everything. It shifts focus away from what cannot be changed and directs it toward what can be built. It removes hesitation and replaces it with movement. And once movement begins, the process of change is already underway. There are two paths from this point forward. One continues to look backward. It revisits missed opportunities, measures lost time, and reinforces the belief that it is too late. This path leads to inaction disguised as reflection. It creates understanding, but no result. The other path is different. It accepts what has passed without resistance. It does not deny the delay, but it refuses to be defined by it. It directs all attention toward what can be done now. It begins immediately, without waiting for ideal conditions or complete certainty. If I were beginning again, I would choose the second path, because action is the only force that transforms potential into reality. There is also a principle that must be fixed firmly in the mind. Time does not reward those who regret. It responds to those who act. Every moment that is used with intention adds to what has already been built. Every action contributes to a growing result, and over time, this accumulation becomes visible, not suddenly, but steadily. What once seemed distant begins to come within reach. What once felt impossible begins to appear achievable. Not because time has changed, but because it has been directed. There is also a shift in how a man sees himself. He no longer identifies as someone who delayed. He becomes someone who acts, and this identity changes his behavior. He does not wait for motivation. He does not require perfect conditions. He does not measure his worth by his past. He moves forward consistently, deliberately, and without hesitation. And in that movement, something begins to form. Confidence. Not loud or temporary, but stable. It comes from repeated action, from knowing that regardless of how things feel, he will continue. This confidence becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Because once a man trusts himself to act, he no longer depends on circumstance. He becomes the source of his own progress. There is also the elimination of a question that once held him back. The question, "Is it too late?" disappears. Not because time has changed, but because its meaning has. It is no longer something to fear. It is something to use. If I were to express this as instruction, it would be this: do not measure your life by when you should have begun. Measure it by how you proceed now. Fix this firmly within your mind. I do not wait. I do not delay. I begin from where I stand. Because the moment you accept this fully, hesitation loses its power. Regret loses its influence. And the present becomes what it has always been, the only place where anything can be built. There is no earlier moment to return to. There is no better time to wait for. There is only now. And what you do with it will determine everything that follows. Not what you missed, not what you delayed, but what you decide to build from this point forward. And once that decision is made and supported by consistent action, your future is no longer defined by your past. It is created by your present.